This is the Tools to Thrive podcast with Evelyn Cook, where we uncover powerful business tools that will help you scale your business so you can retire richer than you ever dreamed possible. Now is your time to thrive. To learn more about how Evelyn Cook can help you scale your business with Tools to Thrive, visit www.cookcpagroup.com.
Evelyn Cook of Cook CPA Group, and I'm here with Colin Baker and Matt Meyer of Ringgold Distilling, LLC. And today we're just going to chat about their company, their brand, and their experiences as business owners and the challenges and successes they've had with their business. We'll start off with, you've got a bottle sitting out here.
Yes. This is our American Dry Gin. It's the first product we had to hit the market.
Okay.
And we've done quite well with it. So might as well
let's
give
go
it a
ahead
shot.
and get a sample here.
Starting the interview off right.
Yeah. We don't want to even tell people what time it is.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, should we test some here?
Absolutely.
Well, cheers, guys. Come on.
Yes, of course.
Cheers. All right.
It's a more herbal kind of forward gin. There's no actual citrus in this, even though you might smell citrus. I mean, citrus character can come from a bunch of different botanicals. In our case, it comes from coriander and cardamom, or a certain type of coriander called distillation coriander, which is completely different from spice coriander, but don't want to go too far down that road because it can get really complicated. Yeah, obviously juniper is the most prevalent because we want this to be a pretty traditional style gin in a sense.
Kind of your first entry into the market.
Yeah,
but also too creative.
Yeah, but also a finesse style gin as well. Like, it's not beating you over the head with juniper or whatever else. It's balanced. Something that you can actually drink neat, which is not very common for gin.
And what inspired you to kind of open?
Oh gosh, that's a long story.
Be sure to mention your CPA path.
Oh yes, so I used to be an accountant.
Yes, very cool.
I worked Big Four in Orange County for a while. Went to school at USC, got a master's degree in accounting there.
You even got the master's degree.
Yeah, I even got a master's degree in accounting.
And master's.
Yes, I did. And got through my first busy season, was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And was getting into home brewing at the same time. And realized that I really loved the weekends when I went home and brewed, hated the week. So I was like, what am I doing with my life? So I ended up quitting my job, moving to London, worked in the brewing industry there for a while. And eventually, because my visa was running out, I wanted to continue working in the UK. The only way for me to do that practically was to get a degree from a UK university. And because the visa rules become a lot easier once that happens.
Sure.
So I ended up going to Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, Scotland. They have a master's degree program in brewing and distilling. Got in there, got my degree. But while I was there, my focus, being in Scotland is pretty conducive to getting into single malt whiskey.
Yes.
So my focus kind of kept creeping more and more towards distilling.
Okay.
And then on a plane flight home for winter break, I had the crazy idea to open a distillery. It must have been knocking around in the back of my mind somewhere. But that's the very condensed version of it. I know I was talking for a while, but that's the condensed version of it.
And I met Colin back in 2008 when we were studying at the London School of Economics. And we hit it off. We've become, great friends since then. And we stayed in touch.
A lot.
Yeah, we road tripped a lot.
I've seen more states with you than any other person.
Yep. A couple of different multi-state road trips. And he came to me with the idea a little bit after that flight. And we just started kicking it around.
You're one of the first people I contacted, actually.
Yeah, we just started kicking it around to see if it could make sense. We bought a bunch of market research to make sure that...
Yeah, because you had created a pretty savvy business plan.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that before we presented it to any investors, we had every answer, which is kind of a good thing because when I grew up, my dad was, and still is, extremely good at asking the right questions when somebody has a plan and poking holes in it. So I have a lot of experience just from all my little wacky ideas. Oh, I want to do this, and he always asks the questions that really get me to realize how it might be not viable, or it might require something that I just don't have the ability to do and whatnot. But when I ran it by him, when I ran the distillery idea by him, I could answer every question.
Okay.
And that's how I felt really good about how well we prepared for that. Because if I could run it past him, I was going to be able to convince investors. And
okay. How did you guys come up with your name? I'm always kind of curious to see how people come up with their name, their logo, and that thought process, because I think there's more steps involved than what people kind of imagine.
Well, we had gone through a couple names that I didn't really like all that much, and I don't even really remember them at this point. And then one got shot down because it would have been a trademark issue. And I started thinking, I remember I was in my old apartment in the same apartment building as you, and I started thinking about stuff that relates to Scotland or my experience in Scotland.
So apparently it's not golfing, we've learned.
Yeah, and so I started thinking, and I was like, okay, what were places on campus that I really identified with? Well, we had the Loch, which was really a pond, but we called it the Loch on campus. And my dorm room looked out onto it, and I walked across every day to class. And then the Student Union on the bank of the Loch, where a lot of the original ideas for this distillery were hashed out.
Oh, okay.
So Loch and Union.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, people a lot of times tend to think that it's Loch for Scotland and Union, like America, like the Union.
which is kind of a fun way to play it off.
It can be a second meaning there.
It's not the original meaning.
Correct.
Yeah. But that's how we came up with it. And we were able to get it trademarked, which is the other big part of it, which is something that I didn't think that much about. I knew we had to get our name trademarked, but I didn't think that much about it going into this process. And that's difficult.
Yeah, that's the legalities of setting up a business can be really, really kind of a little bit unexpected.
You want to expound on why it's difficult? Well, in terms of getting a trademark registered, I think about how many brands are out there. And if there's anything in your general category, so for us that's spirits, beer, and wine, that's anything close, that'll affect it. And then you have these big companies that are constantly watching for things that they can object to. And the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society for us had an issue with Loch. And they put the objection in, it was a day or two before the final cutoff for them to register an objection, and they objected to it. And it turns out they have a ton of objections out. It's kind of an issue. And I don't think they were expecting us to lawyer up and come back. And we did. And
that's usually what happens. They just pick, they're big, so they pick on, the smaller places and just, it's partially to try to keep them out of the market and just to frustrate it and just to make sure no competition even gets started. You can cut it off at the knees, you can cut it off.
I've heard of several other distilleries that have had issues specifically with the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society about getting trademarks registered. Because you can object to a trademark even if you have no basis for it.
Oh, okay.
You can just object to it, basically. And then you have to go through the whole process of getting it registered.
Start over again.
Yeah, so we went back and forth with them. And eventually what we came to is we can use Loch and Union for every spirit besides whiskey.
Okay. So then you're starting that battle with it again for the whiskey.
So now we have to come up with a different... We didn't give up our right to fight them on it in the future, but we kind of figured that we want to have a different brand for whiskey anyways.
Correct. That makes sense.
Yeah, because it would confuse people. People know us for gin. You come out with a whiskey, it's different.
I mean, although I am a stubborn person, so I kind of want, just for the principle of it, for that to be the name, but it really doesn't.
Just to fight them on it so we can use it even if we use
brand development.
Brand.
Just because, I don't know, just because that just didn't sit right with me. But it's just not, it's probably not a good business decision. And, you don't want to just operate on, on that sort of, that's not a good way to go about business.
We ended up essentially coming out with a win on that, even though it was pretty nerve-wracking because we had a lot of branding already done around that because we were so far into that process that the lawyer said it's pretty unusual for you to get an objection at this point. So we kept going on with this process, and then boom.
And they probably waited to the last minute. I mean, I know
intentionally, right?
Yeah, I can't. I'm not going to speculate completely, but just considering the number
and their
history, I don't think it's unreasonable to be suspicious. I can't say for sure whether they did or not. There's no way to find that evidence. So, take what I say with a grain of salt. But it's suspicious.
So you initially came up with your business plan that you kind of worked through with your investors. So you had a business plan. Can you kind of describe some of maybe 3 to 5 of the key factors that you used to prepare the business plan back, 8, 9, 10 years ago?
Oh gosh, trying to figure out. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, it was probably more like 6 years ago or
Yeah.
so. But I think, one of the things was in all the market research we did, we were able to kind of pull out what, the idea of how at the time we got the market research, the higher end was starting to boom. So part of the business plan was to try to figure out how to get in at the higher end. So, how do we do that? How do we make something good enough?
You say higher end, what's the cost per unit?
So the Loch Union bottle is about
Between 35 and 40.
35 and 40.
Shelf price.
Yeah.
Barley gin is like 55.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be coming out with a more limited line that'll be more in like the 70s in terms of shelf price.
Okay.
But, eventually we ended up stratifying where we have our high-end products and we have like our Damwell, which is our well-end line. So we kind of are trying to capture both ends of the market.
Yeah, and one of the things, that we saw in the research is alcohol industry is more or less as a whole insulated from recession, although the high end does fall and the lower end rises in that situation.
Sure.
So I think a lot
You're
of the
seeing
plan
that a lot
was-
with the COVID stuff right now.
So a lot of our plan was potentially, what if there was a recession or something? How would we have something other than the high end that we can sell? So that's kind of where that came from.
Initially,
As well
that
as
plan, it was going to be making the whiskey scotch.
Yeah.
Did you have plans to make gin at that point in time?
Oh yeah, we always
Okay.
had plans to make gin. Basically, our whole plan, and the reason why we built the system that we have to be as versatile as we wanted to have, the ability to both do our own brands and a bunch of them, whatever we wanted to do, and
Sure.
also capture contract business. And so now, contract business is even bigger for us than our own brands. That's
Okay.
something that actually surprised me.
Okay.
Because that's just been taking off like crazy, especially now. And I'm not entirely sure why.
It definitely seems like the craft distilling market is really becoming a thing.
Well, and
Yeah,
people
it's really-
want craft brands without having to build a distillery.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And they want quality stuff without having to build a distillery. And again, like craft or contract work is a big part of a lot of people's business. I think it's a bigger part of ours than most, except for places that are specifically for contract.
Okay.
So basically wanted to stratify what we were able to do.
What is your process for selling alcohol? If you
It's
could
a
kind of
three-tiered system.
Yeah, and I know, Matt, you kind of alluded when we talked previously about the historical underpinnings of that. If you could kind of elaborate, I know a lot of people in the distilling industry are going to understand that, but I don't think the average consumer really understands the limitations that you guys have on your business
Yeah.
to sell your product,
especially
and how that
over
hinders your
wine
revenue.
and beer. Spirits compared to wine and beer is far more restrictive as well.
Yeah, and we live in a three-tiered system where we essentially have to sell through a distributor. The way around that is that Type 74, which allows us in a limited way to sell directly. So for almost all of our sales, it's we sell to a distributor sells to a bar, restaurant, chain, whatever it is, and then the consumer has it. We always have to work through a middleman.
And you don't really have any control over this middleman, right?
Well,
I wish we had more, but
we built some really good relationships, and that the key is to build those relationships with the people on the ground that are responsible for introducing whatever products they have to bars for sale.
That's a really good point. This industry, particularly on the distribution side, is all about relationship equity. That's it.
Sure.
If the people you're dealing with like you, you're gonna get a lot farther. Second, if you have money, that also helps. But we are dealing with a very big distributor that is usually dealing with very big brands.
Sure.
And it took us a while to finally build up all that relationship equity with the people that matter, to where they actually are paying attention to us and are moving products.
Okay.
And that's, if you want some advice for smaller distilleries, if you're working with a distributor, be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Especially
think that's
if
a
you-
big challenge I see for my clients is the ability to sell their product with a good distributor. They may get that distributor relationship, but then it just kind of goes nowhere.
Yeah.
And then if you don't have, I think there's like the three tools of a stool. You've got to have your consumer direct-to-consumer distributorship and then still the wine club sales or something with the winery sales?
Well, for us, it's the distributor sales and contract. And those are the two big parts of what we do. And that helps balance it out, because with the facility we have, it's gonna be a very long time until we build up our brands to take up all of our capacity.
And we didn't have, the marketing budget that,
a
major brand could do. So we had to mostly make our way with just proving our reputation, not just in the bottled product, but with the contracts. It took us a year plus to really get people coming to us for various contract works at, a good rate, which is, it's all about those relationships to get to that point.
Yeah, I think in any business, it's all about those relationships.
It takes way longer too than you think.
It does, doesn't it? You'll talk with someone like, oh, that's going to become my client in another week or two. And like, they're busy with other things. So it just takes a period of time and respectful follow-up, so you're not being a pest, but enough engaging with them.
Because that's my experience all the time. There are people that I will meet that are interested in doing some kind of contract work a year and a half before they end up doing something.
Yes.
And they'll come back, even if I haven't heard from them in a while, all of a sudden they'll be like, hey, I actually want to do something now. So even if a relationship doesn't seem like it's necessarily going somewhere, it might. Just cultivate them, all of them.
Correct. Any tricks that you have or tips for people to continue kind of cultivating those relationships?
Be persistent, but not too persistent, basically, like you were saying. And follow up. Always follow up. Be easy to get in contact with. Because something that I hear a lot with people who come to us is that they have a hard time getting in contact with people. And if contract's a big part of your business, you can't not respond.
Correct.
So be accessible.
And also just make sure that the quality is there every single time.
True.
It's, that one bad client experience could ruin a lot of the relationships. We have to make sure that we get it right every time.
Well, and if you think about it in the wine industry here, and we do wine work, it's a small community.
Yes. Yeah.
If something goes bad here, people are going to hear about it. And if something goes good, they hear about that too.
True. But it's amazing how the bad kind of gets out there quicker.
Exactly. So you have to be very upfront about what your expectations are and produce. And I mean, it helps to have people with experience that know how to run the stills that we have and everything like that, and have the equipment that we have.
So if you're looking about changing your license, what are some of the cost components you're going through deciding whether you want to kind of be direct to consumer?
There really isn't a lot of downside to it, actually. The reason is, so initially we thought we couldn't do contract work with a Type 74, and it turns out we can. And so I didn't want to cut off a huge part of what our revenue would be just to do, to be able to sell direct to consumer.
Sure.
And the way we can sell under Type 74 is pretty limited anyways. You can only sell, I think, 3 bottles to a customer per day. So people can't buy cases and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But because the opportunity is there and there really isn't any downside, that's why we're gonna switch over and do it.
So what were you get a tasting room license here? Will you build out a tasting room?
Eventually we'll build out a tasting room. We don't have one right now. I think the initial plan is to start building up like a gin club.
Okay.
Something like that.
Those are great annuities. You get that ongoing thing, and you can do special bottlings for them. It's really and you get different lines because people will pay more for premium.
Yeah.
Once they get familiar with their brand, they're going to pay for more premium, and you're just
and it's guaranteed sales.
Yes.
All the time, and it keeps getting bigger. The bigger you grow that club. So even just family and friends, I think we get a couple hundred people signed up right away.
Yes.
And it could be significant for us, is the point.
Now, is your software, is it going to allow you to kind of manage that club relationship?
Our software? Mm-hmm. Yes. Jesse and the boys know a lot more about the software than we do. But yeah, it manages everything.
Because you're using Fiverr.
It's Stillhouse.
Stillhouse?
Stillhouse.
They changed their name.
Yeah, it's called 5x5.
Or 5x5, whatever,
yeah.
But it was Stillhouse.
Correct,
Yeah, and we're using that system. And
that has a built-in component or module for the club side?
I'm pretty sure it does. That's a Jesse question, but
Okay.
there's a way for us to figure that out. And I'm sure they've thought about it, because most craft distilleries in California are Type 74. We're one of the few that aren't, actually.
Oh, sure. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a few in Sacramento that I know are having their tasting
Yeah.
rooms open.
I would venture to say that probably the vast majority are.
Yeah. I think I've always been amazed when people are looking at wineries, they do the tasting room, and I think what people forget is labor and overhead, the cost.
Oh, of a tasting room?
They're actually always not that profitable. If you throw in the revenue you're generating versus your cost, you're almost to some degree better to have just pay the distributor more.
Yeah,
And
or
so
just go with the club model.
Correct. You still need a human here managing that club relationship because people call, their credit cards expire, you have to redo the credit card, have that engagement with them. So there's still a little bit more cost there, but
Yeah, but it's not like a tasting room.
exactly.
Well, and it's just more people to manage too.
Yes.
Like
yes.
I like having a very compact team here.
Yes. Yes.
It's very easy to manage people. And it's people that I've known for a long time too.
True. Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
helps.
again, those relationships are so important, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I want to thank Colin and Matt for joining us today and learning more about their distillery business and
course.
what their
Yeah, thanks
plans
for
are
having
for
me.
the future. It was really fun.
Thanks for having us on this.
Yeah,
We'll
it
have
was.
to do this again and kind of see as we work forward what this looks like 6-8 weeks from now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's great to see. Yeah, well, thank you both so much again.
Yeah, thank you.